I read Darker by 4 by June C.L. Tan, and this is my review. Darker by 4 is a young adult urban fantasy with Chinese influences. We have 3 POV characters that we follow: Rui, Yiran, and Nikai. Quick pitch for this is that a king of hell disappeared 18 years before the main plot of this takes place. A blight, which is creating revenants, is taking over the world. Rui is training to be an exorcist to take care of this blight, but in a magic swap that is not supposed to be possible happens between Rui and Yiran, things get crazy. This review will contain spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, come back after you've read the book. This was an absolute whirlwind, and I think that this is fantasy done right. We get a main plot, which is essentially for one of the 10 kings has disappeared, and that has given the nothing the capability of basically gobbling up hell and the mortal realm. But this main plot gets supplemented by subplots that are relevant to each character, and in every single one of these threads, it's either adding to the character growth or the character journey of one of our POVs, or it is very purposefully driving that main plot forward, or it's doing both. Between the search for 4, the magical mishap with Rui and Yiran, the existence of hybrids, and more, at no point did this feel convoluted or difficult to follow because the way that this story was woven together was so well done. Now, were there moments when the plot made me just stop and kind of go, what? Yeah. I don't know, like for instance, when Yiran hits a thing that was previously flying, and at no point did anyone in the car go, that might not be human. Instead, everyone who was in the car was just like, oh my gosh, we hit somebody who was like somebody who was flying. I would drive away. I especially wanted to shake Rui when she wasn't very concerned about the fact that Zizi wasn't communicating with her, even though mages were disappearing, and she knew at this point that it was mages who had worked with the same client he had worked with. I was like, girl, go check on your boy. But those moments weren't enough to take away from the rest of the book, and I am absolutely certain that we have some solid foundation here to carry us through the rest of the series, and I am genuinely excited for what the rest of the series holds. So far as the world build and the magic system is concerned, we get the implementation of exorcist magic, which is Yang-Chi, and this magic is used to stop revenants and save civilian populations. It's a really fascinating, complex, circular system where you have the nothing eating the world, which is creating more revenants because humans are getting infected with the blight. The only thing that can stop revenants is this Yang-Chi magic, but revenants are drawn to Yang-Chi. So as we move forward in the novel, we get discontent in the human populations that are being affected by the blight and turning into revenants, where they're saying, well, you guys are the ones who are attracting the revenants after they've been turned by the blight. Therefore, we should just send you guys away because they'll follow you. But there's still the problem of the fact that the blight would continue turning humans into revenants. So it's this kind of never-ending circular motion of a situation that they've got going on. The only way for them to fix this is to find 4 who has disappeared. Now, not all magical beings with Yang-Chi go to train to be exorcists at the academy that Rui's at. Some of them are like Zizi, who are very much against the guild, and so they have their own little magical community that they exist in, which is technically an illegal community. And then on top of all of that, with the magic system and kind of the world that's happening here, you get hell with the 10 ruling kings minus 4 who are on their end doing everything they can to combat the nothingness because it is slowly eating up the underworld. The chaos of this magic and the way that everything, the magic system and the world build is turned into this kind of cyclical system that is the snake eating its own tail, essentially, but has to be fixed. Otherwise, the nothingness will take over everything, is just chef's kiss off to Tan. You are going to absolutely fall in love with the 3 protagonists here. So our 2 main POVs that we get the most is Rui and Yiran. We'll go into them in a second. And then we get Nikai the Reaper predominantly at first, and then scattered throughout. Rui is a super fierce FMC, and that fierceness comes from a sense of survival. She witnessed the murder of her mother by a revenant, or actually a hybrid, which is not supposed to exist. There's a lot of not supposed to in this book. So Rui has a lot of guilt. She has a lot of trauma from witnessing the murder of her mother, and then she also has this plot line of vengeance going on. She very much so puts herself first. She's loyal to her friends, Zizi and Ada, but she will choose herself first at all times, which does give her this personality trait of selfishness, and she is a selfish character. That being said, there is complexity to the way that she has been crafted that gives her a softer edge in certain moments. Rui's backstory is ingratiated into her character in a way to where she does perceive the world through this trauma and through this guilt, and she chooses her actions based upon this. I thought that that was really well done by the author, because I have recently seen FMCs who have undergone trauma, but that trauma gets used more as a plot device as opposed to being a part of that character's journey. In Rui's storyline, we also get this blossoming romance between herself and her friend Zizi, and so we get this really lovely friends to lovers trope that I think works extremely well in a young adult novel. It took no time at all for me to become invested in Rui. Yiran at first comes off as your typical like prep boy, but then subverts this archetype by really delving into wounds of abandonment. He very much is the black sheep of his family, not only because he doesn't have any magic, but also because he is the illegitimate son of his father. He receives so much scorn from the patriarch of his family, and Yiran really strives, especially once he gets Rui's magic, to basically no longer be a shame or a stain upon the family name. And so it's heart-wrenching when that magic leaves him and returns to Rui, because he basically got to hold everything he thought he ever wanted in his hand and then have it taken away. The kindness in Yiran's heart mixed with his compassion and his search for companionship and his really bitter outlook on the world, I think make him an extraordinarily relatable character. We also get the developing romance between Yiran and Yuki, which is kind of an enemies to lovers trope, and I am so here for it. Like, I need both of them immediately in the next book. I want their story first. I truly think Yiran is going to have the most intriguing storyline throughout this series. And then we get the endearing Nikai, who just wants his friend back. We don't know a whole lot about Nikai, because part of becoming a Reaper is that he forgot his mortal life. We know that he was in the Nothing, which is creating the blight that's taking over the world, and that in order to have gotten there, he must have done some really bad things in his mortal life. So at some point, we are going to get his haunted past. We didn't get that in this book. Having his POV kind of gave us like backstage access to hell and what's going on in the underworld, and having that storyline alongside what's happening in the mortal realm was truly fascinating. I think that in the end, Nikai's storyline throughout the series is going to be one of friendship and of sacrifice. So far as secondary characters go, I think they were really fleshed out. Zizi is amazing, and the fact that he gets compared to a cat is just absolutely perfect. Yuki only appeared halfway through the text, so we don't get a ton of him, but I want more, and I feel like we're going to get more in the second installment of this series. And then, of course, our other secondary characters like Tesha, Teshin, Ada, Ash, they are all fleshed out enough to where we understand a little bit of their motivations. But at no point do the amount of secondary characters become overwhelming or start to detract from our three POVs. When it comes to craft, Tan had a way of constructing her prose that really drew me into the story and into the setting. This wasn't super lyrical prose like what you would see with Rebecca Ross or Madeline Miller. This was more of like an elevated vernacular that focused on imagery in the way that details were explained. And I think that's going to be a lot better for a teen audience, which is what this book is geared towards. So it's not a lot of flowery. It's more of like, I'm creating visceral images for you so that you can be drawn into the text. It was polished. It was clear that this has been edited and people have gone through and said, yes, this is going to be a smooth ride for readers. So solid craft. If you do end up listening to the audio of this, Emily Wuzeller does a really good job of narrating the text. Her voices for the characters are distinct, and she has a good way of portraying her emotions in high intensity scenes. I do think it was an interesting choice to get a female presenting narrator to narrate this text, only because we have more male presenting character POVs with Nikai and Yiran combined. They definitely have more chapters than Rui. Now, don't construe that to think that Rui's voice at any point gets overwhelmed by the other POV characters. That's not the case at all. And this is very much so, like, I feel like mainly Rui's story. At the same time, even our secondary characters, most of them are male. Therefore, you could tell that there were times where trying to present this many voices that were of a distinctly male quality was difficult for our narrator, since she is female presenting. But still, it was good. I finished listening to this in 2 days while I was working on a puzzle, and the narrator does a really good job of bringing the story to life. Overall, I would absolutely recommend this to anybody who is interested in picking up anything that focuses on Chinese influences, anybody who's wanting an urban fantasy. I feel like if you were a fan of Shadowhunters, you're going to like this. I enjoyed this better than Shadowhunters. I can see some people not liking Rui because she is a colder character, but with the trauma that she went through as a teen, it makes sense to me. Like, the way that these characters behave absolutely makes sense, whether you agree with their actions or not. I highly, highly, highly recommend picking this up. It was so good, and I will definitely be continuing the series.